organizations, of course, the world at large, understand what it is we do as PR professional falls on us. So before we jump into today's session, I just want to make sure so I don't butcher anyone's name. There's two people on my hit list right now, and I would like to just confirm. First of all, I will pronounce it, and then you correct me if there's any corrections to the pronunciation. First on that list would be Petio Bogdanov, if I'm correct.
Correct.
I didn't get that, please.
Yeah, that's correct. That's perfectly pronounced.
Oh, thank you very much. So the second person on that list would be Mayor Raja.
Yes, perfectly pronounced.
All right, thank you very much for that. So Steph and Lukman, you guys are safe. So we just want to kick off today's conversation with an introduction of our esteemed guests, distinguished speakers, professionals in their fields. To help us do justice to today's conversation, and without further ado, I'll just give a brief rundown on their career journey, and then I give them the floor to also take us through it from where they began to where they currently are. First, we have Petio Bogdanov, project manager in media analytics at Cometrics, with over 7 years of experience. Petio specializes in media analysis and reputation management. He's also skilled in tools such as Python and SQL, using data and automation to deliver actionable insights and build team compatibility. Next on our list, we have Lukman Oluyede, managing consultant at Brand Arena Communications, with more than 15 years experience in journalism, public relations, and strategic communications. Lukman has worked with global brands across diverse industries, helping them grow, protect their reputation, and strengthen stakeholder engagement. Joining us as well, we have Steph Bridgman, director at Experience Media Analysts. Steph supports PR agencies and comms teams to scale their measurements and insights, recognized recently amongst UK's 50 most impactful PR practitioners in 2025. She also serves on the board of AMEC, Advancing Education and Best Practices in PR Measurement. And finally, on our list, we have Mayor Raja, an experienced marketing and communications professional with expertise across industries, including media, finance, IT. Mayor is skilled in media monitoring, digital marketing, and data visualization, with tools that we are quite familiar with, such as Talkwalker, Meltwater, and so on, combining analytics with strategies to drive growth and efficiency. Right. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of today's conversation, I would just like to give the floor to our guests to introduce themselves in a way I couldn't. Just a quick career rundown and journey from where we started off to our current roles and job. And so first on our list, we'll hear from Steph, if you would like to kick us off on that.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me, first of all. Lovely to be back. I think it's been a few years since I was on one of these webinars. Yeah, so a little bit about me. I started in the industry in 1999. So I was explaining this to a group of students a couple of days ago. It was before the internet almost. I mean, the internet was there, but news wasn't really being published even on the internet. It was in the days of print monitoring, broadcast monitoring. It was obviously before social media, and it was my first job pretty much straight out of university. I studied history of art at university, so I did nothing to do with comms, nothing to do with statistics, but I was assessing social history, I was assessing patterns, I was assessing all manner of different things, which have fared me well in my professional career. So I worked at a company called Metrica back in the day, which was a leading media intelligence agency based in London. And then in 2004, I'd been with them, I guess about 5 years by then. I set up my own company, which we now know as Experience Media Analysts, and we provide humans to an industry that's increasingly trying to automate and reduce the number of humans that are in the industry. And I'm happy to be here, probably banging the drum for the humans today, as opposed to the technology, and how perhaps humans can be supercharged through the technology. So I've been running my own company just over 20 years. As I say, we provide flexible freelance teams to both the media intelligence profession, but also PR agencies and also directly to in-house communications teams. I've been very much involved in AMEC almost since the beginning of my career, but particularly in the past 4 or 5 years. I think I've been on the board since about 2001. And I was involved in the co-creation of some of its educational courses, its foundation course in measurement and evaluation, and so on. I'm a big advocate for best practice in PR measurement. I guess I'm in a lucky position because I've worked with many of the big media intelligence brands and know all of their systems and processes. But because I'm an independent consultant running a small agency without my own tech, but actually able to work with other people's tech, I can perhaps say some things that are a little bit more difficult for others to say. I can point out the faults where others perhaps can't do, and that's because I'm not working for one of those big organizations. So thanks for the opportunity to chat today.
Thank you very much, Steph, for joining us. Next off, let's hear from Lukman Oloyede.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm not sure, I think you've actually done a very brief introduction of myself. So my name is Lukman Oloyede. So I started my journey in communication. I've got a diploma and 2 degrees in media and communication, basically. So it's been like the first love for me. So I started from journalism, and from journalism, I moved into public relations. Then I worked in the agency part for like 8 years. So I moved from PR down to full integrated marketing communication. And then along the journey, I started to have some kind of agency of myself. And so I just do that on the side as part of what I also do amongst other things, basically. Because I've also moved into things like product management and other things, but I also do PR as part of other things that I also do at the moment. So in a nutshell, I'm just a curious mind who is always looking at trends within the industry, things that everybody needs to be aware to just be ahead of the curve, to continue to, be relevant within the industry, basically. Like we often say, innovate or die. So you just continue to innovate and look at what's happening within the industry and how best to help, brands to leverage on that, basically. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Lukman, for joining us today. Next up, let's hear from Mayor.
Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the colleagues and the people who have joined the call. First of all, thank you, E+ Measurement, for inviting me here as a panelist today, and it's a privilege to join this conversation from all the media delegates what we have on the panels. I've been into this industry for more than a decade. It's been 14 years of experience, focused mostly on the Indian markets, where I joined one of the company directly from my master's, where I've studied media and entertainment, and I've been a part of the founding member of that company. Worked there for a decade and a half of my life, over there mostly under the PR evaluations, marketing, communications, and the digital marketing, focusing on the diverse sectors like FMCG, BFSI, infrastructure, and automobiles. But the most and the challenging experience for us and my team specifically during that experience was the politics, which helped us to see how exactly the on-ground activities and how the PR evaluation industry helps the political campaigns during the election times, and how this basically been used as a decision-making tool for the PR companies to strategize further on the evaluation side of the business. I thought to move from the Indian market, and that's where the Onclusive helped me to go global. I've been a very new baby for the Onclusive. It's been just 1.5 years for me to join Onclusive. And many of my Rabat colleagues may have also joined the call, I don't know, but yeah, we also have a presence in the Rabat. And that's where my whole sum of careers is, that I've been into the most of this industry altogether.
Thank you very much, Mayor, for joining us today. So lastly, we'll hear from Petio, a career rundown.
Hi, everyone. My career journey is, I would say, a little bit different than most of the people's. So basically, it happened very naturally, and one would say even by accident. Basically, I was studying in university for my bachelor degree that didn't have anything in common with this industry. But one day, a representative from a company working in the media analytics industry contacted me with an opportunity for freelance work. Of course, I accepted because it seemed interesting. I continued doing it from time to time during my years at university, and after graduating, I started a full-time role as a media analyst, and I got hooked immediately. I got very invested and very interested in the work that I was doing. And over time, as I gained experience, I realized that I needed a broader set of skills to keep growing. So I started looking and exploring PR, marketing, SEO, data manipulation and data visualization tools, and eventually automation. And during the past, when this person contacted me in 2016, let's say during the past 8, 9, 10 years, everything happened naturally. Of course, I put a lot of effort in it, but I think that maybe what helped me to transition from linguistics and languages into automation and media analytics is the fact that I was really eager to learn, and I developed some skills that eventually all of my employers found useful, and they helped me further develop those skills and learn new things and hone my skills. So I would say that if you dedicate your time developing certain skills, the opportunities will follow. So I think that that's how my career journey went, the path.
Feels like we've lost Stanley, and so somehow I feel like I need to step in and speak on behalf until he comes back into the room. What I loved about hearing all of your stories, or some of our stories, is that we didn't follow the obvious path into our profession sometimes, and we didn't necessarily study in a related field. And I think that that's always fascinating to hear people's career journeys. We sometimes nobody often knows about this particular part of the profession until you have graduated sometimes. And I think it's great, Petio, that you were exposed to it even whilst you were a student. I think that's so important to reach out to the younger generations and get them to be enthusiastic about the job opportunities that there are out there with data and analytics. One particular role I'm very proud of doing for AMEC is heading up a group called the Academics and Educators Group, which is around bridging the gap. I like that because I've got the word Bridgman in my surname. I've got the word bridge in my surname, but bridging the gap between academia and professional practice, and making sure that there's firstly a link between those who educate students to keep them up to date with our profession, which is very, very fast changing, but also to allow us to have a pipeline potentially of fresh talent to come into the industry. So I feel very strongly about that. We've got Stanley back now. I was just filling in for a bit whilst you disappeared, so I'm going to go back on mute.
Thank you very much for that, Steph. I must apologize for that. That's something we deal with often. So just to continue with our conversation today, I think automation is something that needs to be discussed because it's no longer a conversation of the future. It is today's business, right? And it drives efficiency, it drives innovation, it drives growth, as we all know. But then there are also questions that it raises on trust, ethics, as well as organization reputation. For leaders, the challenge is quite clear, right? To maximize the benefits of automation while managing its risks, from workforce transformation to data security, from bias to public perception, right? This conversation today isn't just about technology, it's about how responsible we can be in terms of this technology, the transparency involved with this technology, as well as the sustainable impact of said technology, right? Welcome once again to today's event. Thank you again, Steph, for holding down the fort. And as we dive into today's conversation, but before we do that, I would just like to give a few housekeeping tools. Please keep your mics muted for our listeners here today. And any questions, comments, as well as contributions, just type them into the comment box, and then we'll deal with that at the later part of today's event. So now to kick us off, I think it's only right that I call on Steph, since she has already started the journey for us. We just want to break the ice, right? We want to understand what our conversation today is, right? So in your experience, Steph, how should PR teams define and measure reputation when automation accelerates, but sometimes, it oversimplifies the insight?
I'm going to start with that classic consultant type of response, which is kind of, it depends. And I think that's sometimes when automation can oversimplify things too much, because reputation is in the eye of the beholder. And so reputation means different things to different people. Reputation of a company's image can mean one thing to the media relations team and another thing to the investor relations team. And it can mean another thing to the workforce and then another thing to the consumer. And so I think you have to measure reputation from many different points of views and think about it from all types of stakeholders and society too. And that's a key element to a thing called a Barcelona principle, which is a set of principles that those who follow AMIC kind of subscribe to, around considering reputation from various different points of view, and to consider all types of stakeholders. And so I think that's what also then makes it complex, because for example, just thinking about sentiment, positivity, negativity can be positive for one part of those stakeholder groups, negative for another stakeholder group. A company may be cutting jobs, workforce, that might actually be positive for its investor stakeholders, but negative for the workforce and perhaps negative for wider society. And so how should PR teams define it? I think they need to define it in that kind of 360-degree kind of way, and to map out who their many stakeholders are, and then to explore reputation from those various points of view. And that requires different data sources. It requires perhaps looking at media coverage, because that's one type of stakeholder. You might be working in a media relations team and your stakeholders are actually the journalists, because it's your job in media relations to change the point of view of the journalist, not necessarily the point of view of the end customer. It may be that you need to combine that with some kind of market research to understand what your end consumers think about you. You may need to look at other sources of data too. So it's where that level of complexity around measuring reputation comes in, because it's not one thing, and it means different things to different people, and it can be measured from many different points of view. So it depends. over to the next person.
Thank you very much for that, Steph. And I think it was very poetic. You start with it depends, and then you explain what that means, end off with it depends. And that really gives meaning to that phrase, it depends. Thank you very much for that, Steph. But while we're still on the conversation of reputation, I think I want to call on Lukman. You've played in the African space. And so in your view, what do you think reputation means in the African market, where automation tools are, often come from global platforms?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. I think I would just want to buttress from what Steph just mentioned there. So for every stakeholder, what exactly they're looking at in terms of the brand reputation actually, slightly varies, right? In this era of, digital, everything, we are trying as much as possible to leverage on technology. We have to understand the fact that for every market, you'd always have those who are very tech savvy, who are very outspoken, especially when in this era when we have the Gen Z, the millennial, the woke generation of people who just feel like they can easily call up brands on social media on every digital platform. So from a digital point of view, you realize that sentiment analysis is very, very important. The ability of brands to have those social listening tools to be able to pick every mention around their brand. What exactly are people saying? How are they saying it? What exactly is driving these concerns? Especially for the everyday user of your brand, for example, you need to always look out for those. Those are very, very important. When it comes to the brand mention, what are the kind of reviews you are getting around your brand? These days when you hear about people, we are meeting people for the first time, or you are hearing about a particular product for the first time, the first thing that we do, our basic instinct is for you to Google it. You just want to Google the name and find out about it. And your first impression will be built even before using the product around product reviews. What exactly are people saying about it? That automatically forms your view around it, even for people recruiting. So you are recruiting new people into your company. The first thing people want to hear about, okay, what is it like working within that, for that company? People just want to find out, is it a good place to work? Things around that. People just want to find out. So not necessarily about just your customer now, but also every other stakeholder, people you're trying to get into your business. Everybody's looking at what exactly is being reported in terms of media coverage, in terms of your social media engagement. How visible are you? Because digital has become like your digital currency has to be very strong. It has to be something you need to have that digital presence, in this time and age. So all these are very, very important. And for the stakeholders that are not, for example, you don't expect an HNI who's maybe one of your stakeholder, for example, to be playing within the digital space. These are people who, what they look at in terms of your reputation might not be what is happening within the digital space. It might be things around your ROI, it can be things around what exactly are you doing to have that, the edge within the market and other things like that. So like Steph said, so it's still based on, it's subjective. But in this era of digital, where everything is automated,
All right, thank you very
social
much.
listening and analytics are very, very important. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, Lukman, for that. Like I said, he stood to really bring it back home. Steph plays mostly in the international space, and he plays both globally, but he plays in the African space as well. So next up, we've dealt with reputation in different markets. We want to talk about the reality of things, right? So I want to call on Petio. How should PR teams define reality in the media industry when it's increasingly being shaped by algorithms and automated sentiment analysis?
I really like this question. And I think that maybe it's important when we speak about reality in today's media landscape, it's important to recognize that there isn't just one fixed version of it. However, I think that there is one that is the most probable. And I will explain what I mean. For example, if we look at social media algorithms, they shape and curate the information we see, and they're creating personalized reality for each of the separate users. And they're not doing it randomly. They're offering what we see on social media is basically based on our previous behavior. And in a way, these algorithms predict whether a certain piece of coverage will fit into our own version of reality. And similarly, when we talk about AI and automated sentiment, when the AI looks at the article or the social media post, it's not detecting an objective truth. It's basically predicting what is the most probable sentiment based on the data that it was trained on. And I think that PR teams should implies similar strategies, and instead of waiting for something to happen and trying to define their reality, they should be proactive and not reactive and try to predict the most probable reality. And when you predict this reality, you can develop a strategy that answers this reality. And I know that it might sometimes be hard to predict all of the possible things that could happen. For example, if you launch a certain campaign, but I think that there is something that PR teams could heavily rely on when they're trying to predict some outcomes, and this is human emotions. And I feel that if you can anticipate how your audience will react, what will spark outrage, empathy, a sense of belonging, trust, happiness, or even fear, you've basically defined reality. And you have also, I think, avoided a potential crisis by recognizing a likely reality before it happens. So I know that it might sound a little bit philosophical, but that's how I feel that we should act, because that's how AI is evaluating the information. Basically, they are predicting what is the most probable thing. Similar with algorithms. So I think reality should rather be predicted based on the knowledge we have about previous events, about events that happen to our peers, our competitors, and then develop strategies that could fit in this reality.
All right, thank you very much, Petio. I think that was a perfect question, as you stated earlier before tackling it. It's interesting because I think this is a field you deal in on a day-to-day. And he mentioned the need for PR practitioners to adopt a hands-on mentality, right? The AI is programmed to do a certain thing, and that is what it's going to carry out. But then at the end of the day, you know, how do we predict what these things are, what the circumstances are going to be? That's where the human inputs and the human side of it comes in. And he's encouraging us today as PR practitioners to hold on to that, or even learn, you know, how to improve our skills in that sense, to predict, to understand, and also keep behind everything that human emotion. So thank you very much again, Petio, for that. So next I want to move on to Mayor. And while we're breaking the ice, we've dealt with the reputation side, we've dealt with the reality of things. Now we want to kind of just meld it all and make it, you know, make it make sense before we move into the next step, right? So I want to hear your opinion. How should PR teams balance purpose with operational efficiency when adopting automation?
Okay, thanks for asking that question. Stanley, I'm looking at that you are scratching all the backs from all the possible angles, the reputation, and now coming to the operations. Thank you for doing that. Kind of a tricky one, but I would say when you say about purpose and when you say about efficiency, it should both go through hand in hand. It should go hand in hand. Purpose is the most important thing. It should be the most anchor position of your whole evaluation methodology, where efficiency is just the enabler. Automation is great for scale. It shouldn't be replacing the intent behind your communications. Purpose is what actually gives you the meaning. Efficiency is just enables it. So let's say purpose is sitting at the center, and the efficiency, what we call it as on the operational side of it, on the automation or at the AI side, is just the enables which leads to the purpose of the whole campaigns or the PR communications, or helps the evaluation team to actually analyze it. So I would say in practice, that means that machine handles all the repetitive tasks, humans guides the interpretation, ethics, and the context behind it. So I just wanted to give some more highlights, which we exactly do at Onclusive, and Steph have already covered in her answer. It's about the stakeholder analysis. So at Onclusive, we have built this balance, the purpose and the efficiency balance into the automation. The way we work is basically we give automation, gives our client the efficiency at scale. And while our analyst also ensures that every insights what we provide is contextually accurate and aligned with the reputation goals. So let's say, for example, with one of our prominent client who is into the airport business, Automation helps them to track their mentions, where exactly and which media is talking about them, who is talking about them, what is impacting them. But human insights helps them to see how the external factors, like what Steph said in her message. I'm also trying to highlight that again and again, saying that for a brand, external factors like government policies, unions, public chatters, sentiments, all this is important. AI can help you enables that, but somebody has to evaluate that what exactly and how the message has to be portrayed to the audiences. That's where the human interpretations comes in between. Simply, automation can tell you the campaigns. Let's say, for example, uh, a campaign which a PR company is running, automation can tell you it reached to 5 million people or 5 billion people or say 300 million people, whatever the number is. Human judgment will tell you those 500 people is inspired, misled, or indifferent. So where exactly the message has been delivered or not. That's where the human interpretation comes in place. So the balance is clear. The automation gives you efficiency, but let the purpose guide the outcomes, whatever I exactly say.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I'm holding on to your last statement there. Automation guides efficiency, but we have to hold on to the purpose. That is the objective of whatever campaign it is that we are trying to go on to. Thank you very much for that, Mayor. So we want to move into more generalized questions, right? We want to tackle the nuances that exist within today's conversation. First off, I want to call back Petio. What reputational risks, right, emerge when analytics platforms misclassify data, or maybe they overlook cultural or linguistic nuances?
Yeah, I think that the reputational risks are not that different. For example, if a human mislooks those things, and I also think that if you miss a few, let's say, negative mentions, it's not a problem as long as you don't miss the pattern. Because what matters is whether you are monitoring consistently, and if you are able to identify emerging risks before they escalate. So if a platform misses a few negative mentions and they're not part of a pattern, and obviously there is nothing happens. But otherwise, organizations can end up acting on, as we were talking about reality, they may end up acting on a false sense of reality, which can lead to delay crisis response because they've missed some negative coverage. And this may make the brand seem out of touch, insensitive, or even dismissive. They can lose the public trust, their brand credibility. Basically, there are a lot of stakes if you miss something. But again, I want to go back to my initial thought about the difference between the reputational risks that emerge from automated mistakes and the reputational risks that emerge from human errors. Basically, they are very similar, and you can also, I've also observed during my work with analysts and testing different tools, AI tools, I've seen that basically the ML models, the AI, and the analysts make very similar mistakes if they don't have enough knowledge. So I would have to agree with Muir and say that it's really important to have a human factor in your analysis. Don't rely entirely on automation, but you should have expert humans who can understand context, culture, and language nuances. Because if you have someone who doesn't have enough knowledge, they are prone to the same mistakes that the AI can make. And also, I think that there is some fear about AI, and especially when it comes to sentiment analysis. I know that maybe even 2-3 years ago, the automated sentiment was really bad, but I think that it's getting better and better, and companies could rely on it more and more. For example, here at Kumetric, we've developed different tools, and one of our tools evaluates if an article is positive, negative, balanced, or neutral. And we've managed to achieve less than 11% margin error, which is really low. You can expect such margin of error from human work. It can also detect entity-based sentiment. So I think that the technology is getting better and better, but we still need the human factor, and we need experts to overlook and quality check the results.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Petio, for that. So he tackled the risks that are involved, and he says the risks can emerge from both automation as well as the human side. And a key factor he mentioned was a lack of knowledge, right? Or a lack of experience, expertise, whatever you would have. And I think we would agree with that. If the AI tools don't have enough knowledge on what they're dealing with, they produce based off the data they have, which is something he mentioned earlier. And then if you're not dealing with experienced analysts, they could also make similar mistakes. And so that really draws in, the points where people need to focus on, and that is the data, putting importance on that data, understanding the scenario, understanding the circumstance where you're in. Thank you very much, for Petio, for doing justice to that question. So we still want to have a little conversation on that. We still want to talk about the dangers that exist. And I want to call on Uledi to answer this question, right? The dangers that would also arise when brands apply global automation-driven PR metrics without adapting them to local realities.
Thank you very much for that question. Yeah, I think it's very, very important that we always consider, cultural nuances. It's very, very important for every market, for every audience. You have to understand that communication is an art and a science. So in the art of communication, you have to understand how best do I communicate this to the exact audience. In Africa, for example, if you're a global brand, you want to communicate the same thing to your audience in Africa and as well as maybe your audience in Europe, for example. You'd realize that brands like Coca-Cola and other top multinational brands, they try as much as possible to engage multiple agencies on the same campaign. The purpose is the same. The strategy might slightly be different. Why? Because every agency is expected to globalize the idea. So pick that global idea and deliver it in a local approach in a way that would be able to capture the audience and be able to achieve the exact results. And the beautiful thing about automation is that for example, in AI, for example, the machine learning part of it is there. The ability for it to adapt or adopt different languages is also there. So all this helps in terms of, for example, I'll just give you a quick example here. Sometimes last year I helped worked with as a consultant for a company, a customer service company in London, and they are trying to build a sort of a social sort of a customer service solution that will be sort of a chatbot kind of arrangement. They needed you to be able to engage virtually everything you do with their the front-facing customer service. They want the AI to do that on their behalf. We built a solution that was worked perfectly. However, if you ask complex questions, the AI struggle to respond accurately. Why? Because it's now a very complex question. But if you ask a single direct question, it would, based on machine learning, would respond accordingly. But if you make it a very complex question, you get very kind of vague response you get, right? Which is where the human part comes in. So you still need the human element to be able to integrate and be able to get appropriate solution for things like this. So to respond to your question, the ability to understand culture and ensure that as you're leveraging on technology, you are paying some attention to the culture of the audience by putting the human element as well is very, very important in terms of tone, in terms of emotion, and in terms of getting the right message across. Even if it's a global brand, you must localize your idea basically.
Thank you very much, Lukman. I will harp on a couple of things that you mentioned, and I think it just really shows or emphasizes something Mayor mentioned earlier. Having the Petio mentioned earlier, having the experience behind it. And from the conversation we've been having so far, we can see that there is some sense of overlap with things that our speakers are saying. And you can tell that they deal in different spaces. But then once the ideology is correct, these conversations will definitely steer towards a single goal. But then I don't want to leave Steph and Mayor out of this conversation. I also want you guys to tackle this conversation, right? The risks or the harms that could arise, both for the reputation of the organization, the brand, or even a PR practitioner who isn't skilled in this. What are the risks that might emerge when they, blindly apply automation without considering the things such as cultural nuances, linguistics, and so. So to tackle that question first, I'll have Mayor, and then next up, Steph.
I think so. My answer is going to be very similar to what Lukman said, right? So one big risk, mostly and most important, is misinterpretation. Likely, Lukman said that the word or a symbol might have been something positive in one country, maybe a negative or a sarcastic somewhere else. So without being a context or something we know about the local market, automation can be a misleading, I would say. It requires a lot of training for that local particular region or a market where we are applying the global automations. But I would like to share an example how we do here in Onclusive is, because my answers are mostly going to be a experience-based answer. It's not about something like I'm being a salesy over for the Onclusive. But I'll be sharing most of the examples what I have actually implementing right now in the process and in the operations. So what we do, we address this by having in market report writers who guide the reporting team. Also, they guide the analysts and the coders who are at the offshore centers, and based on that guidance, they basically reflect the realities of that particular market. So automations plus the human intelligence helps us to scale and also deliver the accuracy with the higher relevance. I would say in a nutshell for this question, automation may reach to that market, but without human inputs, regional and the cultural grounding, it won't give you the relevance. So reputation management is all about relevance. So relevance is the most important thing, which is held by the local team deployed over there. Steph, would you like to add some points on this?
I'll send an answer. I always think about things like emotions and things like humour and what is funny. And obviously, I'm calling in from the UK here. Sometimes you say that us Brits are really similar to the Americans, but American humour, British humour, two completely different things. So to what extent has the AI been trained to interpret humour from different cultural points of view? I think we've still got a way to go there. So it's just something to bear in mind. I also, going back to, I think, to Petio's point, I think it was really great, the idea of measuring, sort of statistical that level of statistical errors, and how sentiment is almost as good as humans now in assessing sentiment, and that humans are also capable of mistakes in the same way that machines are capable of mistakes. And I suppose I built my business based on having many humans analyzing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of articles, and those articles are now being analyzed not by humans but by computers. And I always, people are always fallible, and one knows that human makes mistakes. So I always would approach every piece of analysis that my humans would work on for me with a certain level of skepticism, and realizing that it always had to be quality controlled first of all. And I I worry sometimes in this era of automation that we don't place as much emphasis on checking the quality, perhaps of the data that's going in first, to make sure that the data that's coming out is good enough. Again, back to AMEC, there's a initiative from AMEC called Data Quality Initiative, and I think that's something that we should all be considering, is what is the quality of the data that's going in the first place, because garbage in, garbage out, and so on. So one has to just to bear that in mind. And then, and a sort of slight side shoot, I'm just reflecting on a comment that was made at a conference I was at yesterday, and it was around another panel session around automation, and it was talking about effectively the next generation. We are experienced professionals here on this call. We might have had 10, 20 years experience in our industry. We know how to ask a good question, and so we're able to get the best out of these automation tools. I worry that in 10 years' time, those who will become leaders of the future will not have the workforce below them that will have the capabilities to ask the right questions, because right now, profit-hungry corporations are perhaps deciding not to hire that younger generation of new starters and new entrants. And so I think that we will face problems perhaps 10 years down the line when that sort of level of middle management, so to speak, do not have the level of curiosity, critical thinking, brain power to ask the right questions of the machines. And then that's the point at which the machines take over. And as we all know, machines get things wrong too. So those are the some of the risks I'm thinking about, is just the risks, for our younger generations, but also for the companies that will perhaps suffer in future generations' time, because they nurtured their bottom line today, but they didn't look at their prosperity and sort of pipeline of talent for the future.
Thank you very much, Steph. I think earlier she mentioned that she was going to be doing a lot of that, speaking on the risks that do exist, and trying to kind of meld these two worlds on why your rationales are very just that. Thank you very much for that. Thank you to our speakers. And so we want to continue this journey. We want to delve deeper into more specific questions and real world applications, right? So we know where our guests have, where their careers have moved from and where it has led them to. And so I want to have more directed questions aimed at our speakers today. And I want to call on someone who, lives that intersection on a daily basis. And Petio, I want to hear from you, right? How do you integrate coding and automation? You work with tools like Python, SQL, and so on. Into how do you meld these two things into reputation monitoring without losing contextual meaning?
Actually, it's pretty simple. What we do in Cometric with our AI tools and all of the other things that we use, to avoid losing meaning, you should always keep the raw coverage in the output. That way you can go back, check context, and verify whether the algorithm's interpretation matches the reality. It's something that Steph mentioned. Basically, we treat all of those tools as a human analyst, and we know that they make mistakes. So we pay special attention to quality checks, and we always review the results. We look for patterns that look suspicious, so we dig in, validate, we refine. And I think that this balance between automation and human oversight is what keeps the analysis scalable, of course, and trustworthy. The human factor is still needed. So quality check, keep the raw data. If you notice something suspicious, go back, check. So if I give a specific example, when we are analyzing content, whether it be 100 articles or 10,000 articles or 20,000 articles, we always keep the articles in the output. We don't receive a number they are, let's say, 45% positive coverage, 96, so on, so on. We can go back and check each article that has been tagged as negative or positive and see if this was actually positive and negative. And if you notice that there are a lot of negative articles, of course, you will go and check and see, is it real? Is it a mistake? And then revise. You always consistently train the models so they stop doing those mistakes. But the most important thing, I will repeat it, keep the raw coverage in the output. You can't rely on insights given by the AI or evaluations. If you have a tool that gives you insights, always keep the articles that the tool used to base those insights on. So you can go back and see, is it correct? Did the AI hallucinate it? Because that's something that happens often, especially if the AI doesn't have enough information. If you give the AI a prompt and it doesn't have enough information, it will hallucinate, and it is the worst thing that can happen. So quality check, quality check, quality check. That's the solution.
All right. Thank you very much, Petio, for that. Emphasizing the need for quality check, right? It's continuing from the conversation he was speaking on earlier. You know, like the tools do a certain thing, and then there's still a lot of work to be done after that, and that's something today's conversation is intended to point out and to help us understand. Mayor, from an operations perspective now, right? How do you ensure automation enhances quality without undermining trust in, you know, PR outcomes?
Amazing. Thanks for this question. Again, I would say there is a lot of overlapping in the answers probably you may be hearing today. What Petio said about the quality checks, I may also speak on the quality checks in this grounds as well. Where automation is one part which helps us to scale the task, which helps us to classify, tag, volume, sentiment analysis, and the quality checks from a human being ensures the nuances, context, and the cultural understanding of that particular content, which is great stuff. But I would say if we really want to integrate these two things together, we should always keep a clarity on the methodology and communicate this to the client as well, so that how exactly we are processing, we are collecting, and we are verifying the data we have gathered for them. So if we are very much clear about the processes, then probably the outcome what we are planning to get from a particular collected data or client's data, it will be easily accepted by the client. There will not be a lot of questions, and they understand that to manage the scalability and the volume, people are now focusing more and also utilizing the technology. But rightly said by the Petio, I would say we also implemented the same strategy on Inclusive, that we pair automation with structured QA reviews. Analysts, they check the automated data, what tags automatically, whatever the volume, sentiments, categorizations, classifications, whatever we call them. And whatever the metrics we have asked the tool to get it tagged. And we continuously feed the corrections into the system so that it regenerates, it's relearn, it's automated. And whenever we get the results in the future, it is somewhat tweaked and matching to the PR outcomes to that extent. But I would say automation is just an accelerator right now. Trust in the quality comes after the clear methodology communicated to the client. We should be also transparent and also say that human judgment is must required. So that's where PR outcomes is basically reliable, defensible, and actionable, considering everything is transparent to the clients as well. So I would say we should also add a transparency whenever we do a communications with the client, saying that this is what the whole methodology we have adopted, and slowly and steadily introduce AI into the system to help the scalability. And with the limited human resources, we can give you better PR outcomes for the larger clients as well.
Thank you very much, Mayor. That was very well said. So he has added something to that. Quality check, as well as I'm sorry, what was that you mentioned? The last statement.
I said clear methodology to the client.
Yes, methodology about your methodology, which is very important. So he's talking about trust, and earlier on, Petio spoke about the human input. But then he also mentioned something about interlapping questions, but I think that's inevitable. But then the key thing is, just as Steph mentioned earlier or pointed out earlier, humor in the United States is different from humor in the UK, and that happens all around the world, and I think those are the things that we as listeners want to pick out from everything our speakers are saying here today. So moving on to our next question, I think Lukman, you will have to tackle this for us. We still want to talk about automation, right? But now we want to put these tools at the center of the conversation, right? How do you ensure that automated insights support, rather than undermine stakeholder trust, in a sensitive industry?
All right. Thank you for that question. So humans create tools, create automation. So our purpose of why we need to build them in the first place, or what exactly do we need them for, would inform what kind of information we need to feed and how we intend to use them. I will just point out a very interesting example. Sometimes in 2023, Samsung banned the use of AI within the company, and that was due to the fact that they observed that most of the employees were actually using, automation and AI to virtually do everything they need to do on a day-to-day, right? So repetition became very obvious. As a telecom company, it became worried about, privacy, codes being repetitive, people just using similar things. So while it's very good for organizations to think of, okay, let's, end things that is repetitive, let us just automate it. That enables you to, be more productive and efficient, and as well as also reducing the cost of, having to do that over and again, right? But then again, you also have to be very careful and be mindful of things that you think that are very sensitive, because of course the machine is learning about those things. And you don't want to, put yourself in a situation where things that you think are very sensitive to your business is now being fed to the, to whatever automation process you've built for your business. So it's very important that we are, as we are leveraging on technology to solve problems, we're also not creating new problems, basically. It's very, very important that we are very conscious of that. In a nutshell, I just believe strongly that what businesses need to have at the back of their mind is, what exactly do we need it for? And do we really need, automation in this instance? So the question would always be from two angles. It will always be what exactly we are doing right now. Can we have this done in an automated process? And the question should be, should we even automate this? So that should be the question. It shouldn't be about what exactly do we need to automate now? And is it necessary that we need to automate this, or do we need to do it, using human elements to have it solved, right? I know we've all mentioned, about, human intelligence, the efficiencies that comes with, humans doing things and then machine doing it as well. And it's inevitable sometimes. Error is part of the process, it's part of growth. Even as you're using the machine or you're using humans to get it done, some errors would happen in between. But it's very, very important that we are very, very clear in terms of what exactly we are doing. Should we be using human to do this, or should we be automating what exactly we are doing at this time at this point in time? You understand? It's a fundamental question that we need to always ask at every point in time that we're thinking of automating or leveraging on AI to solve a problem. We should be asking ourselves, should it be human doing this, or should we be leveraging on AI to get it solved? So it's very, very important at every point. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Lukman. So his approach is basically focusing on the structure, approaching the use of automation and structuring it, based on the company's policies. Do we need to automate this? Are we good without automation in this sense? Or is automation going to play a vital role in increasing the efficiency, within this certain scene? So I want to call on Steph, right? Steph basically is serving the role of pointing out caution, because she deals mostly with the hands-on and human input, and she deals with organizations, she works with teams. And so I want to ask you two questions. So you deal with them, first one and then the second. The first question there is how you would guide organizations to integrate automation into their measurement frameworks, without losing nuances or meaning. And then the next question, I would ask you to share an example, right? A real world example where automation diluted the value of measurement, and what lessons you took away in trying to restore credibility.
Okay, I would probably answer the first question by guiding customers to consider it with a slow start, and realizing that with a slow start, you've got to have actually a lot of human heavy input at the beginning. Again, it sort of boils down to the fact that I've had a couple of customers reach out to me in recent years. They have, let's say they've gone out and they've purchased, let's call it software as a service. So they have been convinced by some brilliant marketing and some wonderful salespeople that this clever computer can answer all of their questions. So they go and spend all the money, and they think they just switch it on and it magically works. But ultimately, everything's only as good as the way it's set up, and then that's only as good as the way it's been set up and checked to make sure that the way it's been set up it is correct. And so I think end customers can sometimes forget that whilst they're buying into an automated solution, it is the imperative is upon them as a human to get things right in the first place. Otherwise, anything that comes out further down the line is just complete potential rubbish. And so I've found it very interesting that customers have reached out to us as a team of humans who understand this space and can interrogate these databases well and listen very carefully to the customer's needs and provide them with sort of bespoke solutions. I find it interesting that they reach out to us to do that, and that they choose not to go back to the data provider that they're paying money to in the first place, who perhaps should or do have a customer service chatbot. Maybe it's a chatbot. Maybe the chatbot is not good enough at answering their questions, and that they don't have enough humans. And so I suppose it's just coming back to the fact that unless you're curious about what's going in, and unless you're curious about checking what's coming out right at the beginning, trust never builds, and then trust sort of never remains. So we had a client, for example, a couple of months back, and they were assessing their presence in the media versus their competitors. They had set up a series of 10 Boolean searches for them and their competitors. Those searches were completely incomparable against each other. One search for one customer included this country, but not that country, and this, that, and the other, and excluded this for that reason. And so we have a phrase here in the UK that they weren't comparing apples with apples, they were comparing apples with pears. And so how can you have a really meaningful share of voice analysis when you're looking at one thing over there and another thing over there? And so I suppose part of that also comes down to the way the brain works of the person that's setting up the measurements and the system. And sometimes if you're not getting an experienced media analyst involved, here's a plug for my company there, some of my end clients are PR people, and perhaps PR people don't have that kind of neat, methodical, logical brain that perhaps we analysts do. And so they might set something up in a really messy way, but not realize it's messy. And they need someone to come in and explain that the dashboard is full of mistakes. It needs tidying up. It's all completely meaningless unless there's kind of consistency in the approach of where they look for their content. And so I think it requires that's an example really of where automation has, without getting us involved, completely had diluted the value of the end product that they were then reporting back to the board. They were reporting back to the board based on a share of voice on a meaningless set of inputs that just, just weren't looking at the same thing against each other. And so I think you just have to be careful sometimes to place all of your faith in the system, and to think that it's all going to magically work from the moment you switch it on, because it requires that significant ramp up at the start phase to train it, to get it right, to set it up properly, and then it can work beautifully, going along. But it requires that investment of time at the beginning. I think a lot of people forget that.
All right. Thank you very much, Steph, and also the example she gave, tying it to the organizers of today's event, P Plus Measurement Services, and I'm sure our Chief Media Analyst is present here today, and he would have been agreeing with Steph all the way. There's times where major corporations have carried out campaigns, and they have to come to him, to help them understand what they put out there, and then it's his job as an analyst to simply walk them through it. And you can't get that anywhere else. You can't get that through tools. You only get that through experienced analysts and through a medium such as a media monitoring firm. Thank you very much, Steph, for helping us break that down. But now we've entered into the world of examples, real world experiences, and so I want to call on Petio, because you deal with this. Steph spoke majorly on understanding that these tools exist, yes, and they have their advantages, but then we can't totally undermine the human input, which is a shared sentiment by all our speakers here today. But Petio, I want to hear from you, right? A real world instance where automated analytics provides early warning signals, right, of reputational risk, and how you measure the outcome. Because earlier you spoke on predictive approach, so I want to hear more on that, a real world example.
Okay, great. So one example happened earlier this year. We were tracking media and social conversation around Eurovision Song Contest. And an automated analytics flagged some protest activity and gave a warning that it could impose a reputational risk on the sponsors of the event. So what we did is we paid close attention, and we managed to react really quickly. We talked with the client, and we set monitoring and measurement protocols to track the brand exposure to those negative media. So the alert helped us to look at a possible problem. So we didn't see that there is an actual problem, but the alert flagged protests, which could have influenced the client reputation. Another instance, we saw early warnings of conversation shifts among some US key opinion leaders around, you may expect, corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. And this actually resulted in activating an ongoing topic landscape tracking program where we monitored a lot of things. So we measured industry and brand exposure, brand focused sentiment over time, visibility of brand spokespeople, specific topics, policies, changes, and so on. And we continued to do it for a long time. So at the end, we were able to measure sentiment trends, shifts in narratives, visibility of spokespeople, and how the company's messages resonate among the audience. So overall, we go back to what we were talking about during the whole webinar. We see an early warning by AI, but then the human touch comes and we take over the control. So that's one good example. And the predicting part, when we saw the warning, we predicted that it could influence our clients, the sponsors of the Eurovision event, for example, or it could influence clients who have strong corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. So yeah, that's how we did it for those two examples.
All right, thank you very much, Petio, for taking us into a real world example. We also want to hear from the operational side of things. So I'll call on Mayor to share an example, an experience in your professional line where operational automation improved performance, right? But you also required the human oversight to safeguard reputation.
Yeah. Again, a very good question, and thanks for actually requesting us to highlight one of the examples what we have experienced in our career. One I've already shared about the stakeholder analysis, where the humans are the people who actually connect dots. For one of my client, for the inclusive clients, one of the inclusive clients was dealing in the airport business. So how the unions, government policies, environmental concerns, public sentiments are connecting the dots. That I've already explained. One of the most important one I would like to explain, which is coming from the Indian market and which we have basically, so we got that client from one of the tool who is basically dealing with the DIY, and the client has basically adopted that company only to do the activities in terms of their media monitoring and the insights. But when we got them, we saw that they have a higher, they are a very good sentiments. They have a very limited sentiment, but it is mostly not on the negative side, on the neutral and the balance side, and the engagement was not that great. The client comes from the FMCG sector, and they were planning to launch. The client is a conglomerate. It's a bigger company, but they have to start a FMCG division of their brand, and they have one more division of their company called Tobacco Market, which is very big in the Indian. So they were the largest cigarette manufacturers in India. So media were writing a lot of articles. So when we got the client, it was totally done on the automations. There were the tools. But when we got the client in-house, we just brainstormed for 3 months that why the sentiments are not turning positive and the high engagements are not coming in. So our team sat together, and I'll just take one point from Petio's answer. What happened? He answered just a few minutes back about the key messages. All the media houses in India were positioning that brand, saying that India's largest cigarette manufacturer is coming up with a new FMCG vertical, may have a lot of biscuits in their flavors, which is not connecting with the audience. And the insights and the report writers sat together, thought what sort of actionable insights we should give it to them. AI is helping them in calculating reach, volume, everything. But what does a particular connect should happen with the audience, which is they are not getting it. And there we found that if a PR team can push a messaging saying that India's largest wheat flour manufacturer is launching biscuits, that will connect the audience with the 2 different products. So a wheat flour is a product through which the biscuits are manufactured, and that's how the positioning will change for the client. And actually it helped. So when we saw the 3 months trends, we have seen the sentiments turning positives, and a lot of engagement and attractions have been started about that product being launched. So sometimes positioning is also important when I say, and as I say, automation can boost efficiency, but human oversight is essential to connect this context, identify the actionable patterns, and safeguard the reputations. And if you deploy this kind of things, it may also lead to a better sales numbers for brands to come in. So reputation with human intelligence is important. And this example is basically a very touchy for us, because this have actually changed the positioning for a particular brand when we have given the actionable insights.
All right, thank you very much, Maya, for that. So before we jump into our next guest and the question targeted at him, I would like to appreciate Steph for your proactive approach to today's session. If we refer to the chat box, I think one of our listeners here today already dropped a question directed at Steph, and she has done justice to that. So for the listeners here today, you can just as well go into the chat box, drop your questions directed towards our speakers, or just general questions or comments, and I'm sure they would do justice to that in due time. So moving on to our next question or approach. Now we want to come home. We want to talk to Oluyede, and we want to have an example from you, Lukman, to share a case study where human insights corrected or complemented automated analysis to improve the brand sentiment.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, it's a very good question. I'll just give a similar example of what a recent campaign I did for a fintech company. So the company used to sort of a lending company initially. They were just, using the app lending kind of thing, micro lending. So they recently got a license to operate as a microfinance bank. So they moved fully into, bigger, operations. So they ran a campaign recently using micro influencers, which actually went viral on social media. The campaign was doing quite well. So we're actually brought in to help in terms of ensuring that as they are doing the campaign, we are helping in terms of following up in terms of how well is the campaign doing, basically just gauging how well the campaign was doing at the time. Interesting thing was while the campaign was out there doing very well, average users, social media user who were just trying to ensure that they're also trending in terms of with their own posts, started using the hashtag of the campaign in their own general, not unrelated, content. I woke up one morning and then opened my social media and I could see almost about 500 plus, engagement. I'm like, whoa, this campaign is doing very well. And then I noticed that it seems to be going towards some kind of negative sentiment. I was kind of worried, only for me to go and take some time to go through each of those comments. Then I realized other people have actually jump on the campaign using the campaign hashtag, but talking about other things around events that are not even related in any form or shape. Um, what that means is we have to then, sit down and start going through each of those, content to really figure out what exactly is the real content related to, the real engagement and which one are just, bandwagon effect. People are fond of doing that. Once they realize the campaign is doing very well, they also want to trend organically. They just drop on on the campaign and just, throw all sort of content around something like that. And that was almost going south. But for the fact that we're able to filter and then realize that, oh, these are actually not related to the brand, but are people trying to come into the engagement. So the feedback at that point was to just tell the micro influencers to ensure that they, take control of the conversation again. Just to ensure that we don't lose, the 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 good, narration or the narrative that we've been able to build for the brand within that period, just because other people who are not related are also jumping on it at that time. So what it means is that you have to always be, very at the very top of it, even if you are leveraged on, software or any automated process in terms of your sentiment analysis and all. You have to ensure that you're also keeping tab of what exactly is going on. How is that influencing a brand? Is it positive, negative? Is it neutral? Just like Petty also mentioned there, it's very important to always look at those from time to time. Don't believe, okay, we've automated this. We're just going to be checking the report at the end of the week. Before the week ends, you might actually be dealing with a lot of, catastrophe or calamity at the end of the week. So you just have to ensure that you're paying attention to what exactly is going on from time to time, even as you're leveraging on the automated process. So that's just an example of what can actually go south if you're not keeping tab, even if you're leveraging on digital or automation.
All right. Thank you very much once again to our speakers for absolutely doing justice to today's conversation. We want to wrap up today's session, but there are still a few corners we want to, tackle before we close off today. And this part is more of a learning curve, right? We've talked about it. We've tackled the risk. We've tackled the nuances. We've tackled the emerging trends, right? But now we want to talk about best practices, right? How well can people adopt or adapt to these changes, or how can they stay in front of certain changes? So I want to call on Steph, right, to give us a principle, for measurements that you believe will remain essential, irrespective of how far automation goes in tomorrow's PR work.
Thank you, Sonny. Well, I think it comes down to curiosity. Curiosity to ask the right questions of your customer or your client to make sure you're giving them the right answer. The curiosity to tease out of them what their objectives are for their campaign so that you can actually find the right solution and range of metrics and measurement tools that can answer that question. Because sometimes media coverage analysis might not be the right way of doing things. You might want to look at social media, you might want to look at how people search, you might want to look at a whole other different range of data sources to provide your evidence. Curiosity, like I said, to not put all of your faith in the machine in the same way that I never put all of my faith in the people. To a curiosity to check for the mistakes, and then that curiosity to learn how to ask the right question. And I think we're all, as we all experiment now with AI and realize that you can ask the same question of an AI tool and get 5 different answers, we all now need to learn how to ask the same question 5 different ways, perhaps to get the answer that we were looking for. So I think that's the sort of principle that will always endure in measurement. It's something that sort of stuck with me ever since I joined this profession all those years ago. Curiosity to carry on learning, curiosity to never stay still, curiosity to be humble enough, even when you've been in the industry your whole life, to realize that you just don't know anything because it changes all the time. And that sort of humbleness and curiosity, I think, will keep us grounded.
Thank you very much, Steph. To build on that, curiosity, continued learning, right? That's something that I feel is very important. And thank you very much, Steph, for pointing that out. As PR professionals, as PR practitioners, automation is not, go and rest. It means, the work is easier, but then the principles still stay the same. The objectives still stay the same. And that is what Steph is trying to buttress with that principle of staying curious, to learn, to grow, to improve, to widen the range. Because I think she mentioned something earlier that at what point the machines take over. But then I think if we continue learning, they stand no chance. And so that is something that I would just advise and nudge everyone here today to practicalize continuous learning, curiosity within the job, within the sphere. Thank you very much for that, Steph. So we want to move on to PETIO, best practice, right? What is one best practice you believe that PR team should adopt, when using said automation tool?
Yeah, I think that one best practice I would recommend is using the 70-30 rule, which basically means that you should rely on automation for 70% of the work that you do, and then the rest 30% should be for humans. So, for example, 70% of the monitoring could be scanning the coverage, flagging trends, doing the sentiment, and the rest for the human would be interpreting nuances, verifying context, assessing cultural nuances, doing the QC, making the work that matters. So I would say that what matters right now in this age of AI, and Steph mentioned it many times, it's the ability to query, to do prompt engineering, to have strategic thinking, to have pattern recognition, and to ask the right questions. Because the AI at the end is just a tool, and if you don't know how to use this tool effectively, you won't get the best results. So 70% of the work is for the AI, and the rest of the work is for the humans. That is a good rule that's been emerging recently in all industries.
All right, thank you very much, Petio, for that. The 70-30 principle is what he harps on, or he's buttressing here. And from what he said, I don't want our listeners here to get it wrong. The 70% doesn't necessarily mean that is the most important part. It does mean that automation can actually take care of, considering you're dealing with bulk numbers or a wide range of spaces, that 70 is what it means, but the 30 is still the essential part. It's still that human input where the work has been made easier through automation, but then you still have that 30%, which is, completes the 100%. So thank you very much for that, Petio. We also want to go quickly to Mayor to just give us from the operational side, right? How would you or what would you recommend to teams, when using automation to manage reputation more effectively?
Perfect. Thank you. And I would also like to add the answer to the 2 minute of what she asked me into the chat space. So I'll answer both of the questions together. I would say I would define the clear workflows and combine automations with the human checkpoints. As I said earlier, what all automations can do, but human intelligence, this should also include assigning local report writers or a senior analyst to guide the reporting, ensuring the cultural nuances and the market specific insights are also captured. Uh, Methodology should be transparent to the clients. It should also show them that how we are processing everything, and mix of this two would give you an approach in two different aspects. It maintains the trust in the insights, what we're delivering to our clients. It clearly says what exactly and how the defined workforce and the workplace is, and the approach towards the research, what we're going to deliver at the end of the month to them is. It also allows PR teams to leverage automation efficiently because they know what exactly has been automated, how the humans are interpreting it, how the end product is delivered to them, and where the human intelligence is actually used with. Automations, we can use it, and we are currently using it in a lot of repetitive tasks. But as I said, human is the most important element which factors out the actionable insights for them. And that's where I would say it efficiently compromising the quality and the credibility of their effort. So we should focus more onto this. Two different things like allow PR teams to leverage automations efficiently without being compromising the quality or the credibility of their outputs. But it should also use automation in a lot of repetitive tasks. So which will help us to trust and develop trust or maintain trust with the clients in the insights inputs what we deliver to them on a monthly basis.
Thank you very much for that, Mayor. Like I said, these are best practices, and they are doing justice to this, our guest speaker. So lastly, we want to talk to Lukman, advice to, African-based PR practitioners, right, in implementing said automation tools or integrating them into their communication strategies, right? What would be your number one advice to them?
My advice would be first, you need to have a very clear goal. Like I said, you need to always ask your question, why? You need to always have the answer to the why question. Why exactly do we need to do this? And if it's going to be repetitive, is it better to automate it? If it's something that will require some kind of emotional intelligence, human nuances and things like that. Do we need to have human element at that point in time? You need to always do a sort of a small pilot project of everything you do to say, okay, let us try this within the a small scale of it to see how effective and how efficient this would be before you go and implement this fully, just so you can be prepared for what exactly is coming for you in that instance. You also need to be mindful of the kind of tool you are using. Are you using the right tool that will give you the right result? For example, we've talked about TalkWalker and a couple of other software that are out there. You need to really know what exactly you're looking out for, which would inform the best or the right tool or data you should be looking at that point in time. And yeah, so you also need to invest in terms of training. So like we all been saying, it's very, very important. Even if you need to like train the machine in terms of machine learning and things like that, people who are working behind or using the tool also need to be well informed and well educated to be able to know how best to implement and leverage on available software and technology that is available or accessible to them, and what exactly they're willing to invest in. And just to respond to the question that I also have here, which is regarding first positive. Some organizations are full of, in PR, do what we call a larger than life experience. They create that, in that impression. You find a lot of organizations. I remember in Nigeria, we used to have a company called Payport. They came very big. They sponsored, a Big Brother in Nigeria, and people were like, oh, these guys have arrived. They are here to stay forever, things like that. And we had another company called Patricia. we're a major sponsor of Big Brother as well. Well, we are these companies today, you know, so some companies, they lack the real investment, the substance, but they've created their larger than life impression. And what that means in terms of implementation or in terms of positioning is it's going to erode the trust that people would have in your brand. It's going to be a waste of resources, because for you to be able to, you know, build your reputation again, it will cost you more, if and a longer period to get that done. You know, and then it will also damage the brand, you know, market value as well. And in between all that, I might also run into some kind of legal and, you know, reputational issues, and regulatory issues as well. Yeah, so if you claim you've earned £100 million, for example, you would find the regulator coming to say, okay, can we see your book? How much have you really declared in terms of what you've earned? You know, those kind of things can put you in, you know, trouble and things like that. So those are some of the things you also need to be mindful of, as you're leveraging on technology and also trying to tell your story. You have to ensure that you're also telling the right story and leveraging on the right technology, basically.
All right, thank you very much, Lukman, for that. So looking through the comments, I see that the chief media analyst at P+ Measurement Services has, in his opinion, a slight disagreement with something Petio mentioned earlier. And probably Steph also has some input on that, because earlier she mentioned, you know, at the earlier stages, it is important to prioritize the human input, right? So Philip here is saying that 70% AI is a question mark, and he says for him, he feels like that is too much. Petio, would you have anything to add to that before we?
Well, probably the word that he used, leave for AI. When I'm talking about 70% for AI, it's not that AI will do this work and you will not touch it. It's AI will prepare the initial data that you would work with. And let's say something really basic that all of us are using in our day-to-day media monitoring. When you are trying to collect your data, let's say you have a topic, in your database, you usually use a content provider that when you write your query, the content provider automatically puts all of the data in your system, and then you start working with the data. So this is something that is generally agreed. It's something new. It can change, but if you feel that 70% use of AI is too much, you can even make it less. The idea is that you should never rely 100% on AI, and even the work that you delegate to AI, you should quality check that and ensure that it was done correctly. This is just a basic guideline. If you feel that 70% is too much, you can lower it, of course. You can make it 50-50, or you can use 30% AI and 70% human touch. It also depends on the industry and on the client and on the coverage that you receive. Some coverage requires more human input. So it's up to you. This is a basic guideline. Don't take it as a golden rule.
All right, thank you very much, Petio, for that. Steph, I don't know if you have anything to add to that conversation.
No, I mean, the sort of 70-30 is interesting, because I always used to use the 80-20 rule, not necessarily in relation to AI, but typically I think 80-20 is called the Pareto principle, and often you'll find that 20% of your media coverage creates 80% of your impact. I suppose the way I interpret Petio's analysis is that if we only have to spend 30%, in a sense, we could be doing 3 times as much work as we are now, and so maybe we could be 3 times more profitable, or I don't know. It is a huge opportunity. I don't see it from that point of view, but I have to admit, I've also come very late to the AI party. I've been very skeptical until recently. So I know Petio and the guys there at Cometric are way ahead of the curve in terms of the stuff that they've been doing from a automation and machine learning point of view for decades. So they know their stuff over there.
All right, thank you very much for that, Steph. I don't know if any of our other guests, Mayor or Luke, want to have anything to add to that conversation.
Yeah, so what I just want to add would be just like Petty also mentioned there, you have to understand every market, the industry, you understand. So if you're dealing with an industry that, technology is very, very big. For example, fintech, for example, you need to leverage on technology to really figure out what kind of data, what are people talking about, or you're into, bottom of the line, bottom of the pyramid kind of products. Maybe you sell things that are people that virtually everybody is using, right? So it means that your data will be very, very big, and it will be difficult for you to keep up of everything if you're not really leveraging on technology to really be able to get as much data that you then need to like filter and then be able to see how you can really get those sentiment that you are really looking out for, depending on what exactly you need it for, basically, right? And you might be working in an industry that technology is not really needed. For example, oil and gas, they're not speaking to everyday user, right? So in that kind of industry, your data would be very, very limited. You probably need to do some kind of more physical engagement, speaking in some kind of maybe B2B kind of arrangement, not necessarily, yeah, it might even be going as far as going to print media and some other, traditional media to really get some kind of, feedback or analysis that you need, not necessarily leveraging on digital. Yeah, so I think industry is very important. The kind of audience you're targeting or the kind of region or whatever is also very important. The proximity and things like that are very, very key, right? But it will be difficult for you to do a global campaign and you don't want to leverage on technology. I doubt if you'll be able to really get, enough, analysis of that kind of instance.
Thank you very much, Lukman. Mayor, I don't know if you would like to take the floor on that.
I'll not take much of the time. I'll just conclude that with a very limited sentence. Yes, it's important to take a leverage of this technology for sure. But as I said in my conclusion wrap-up question, as well as you have asked, human intelligence is much more needed, and rightly said by the Lukman that bifurcations in the sectors and the usage of technology in specific sector depends how we should do that. So aligned to all three of the questions, I don't want to overlap and take much of the time for all the audiences joining this call. So yeah.
Thank you very much for that, Mayor. And also thank you to Philip for a very engaging question. And we've heard from all our guest speakers. And I'm sure if we leave all five of these experts and professionals, the conversation might just keep on going. But then in the comments, you can see that they've dropped their ideas on this, and many, that we can adopt or even learn from, because remember, these are all professionals, these are all experts in their fields. So without further ado, I would just like to let our guests know that we want to take a snapshot for today's event, sort of your credits for today's event. So your best pose, and then my partners will take the snapshot. All right, thank you very much. I think that's enough time. So thank you once again to our guests for being here today. And as we wrap up this session, I encourage all of us to reflect on what today's conversation has been. Automation connects our work, yes, but there are very important questions that we need to ask, and our guests have highlighted them, and they've done justice in answering majority of them, right? Are you balancing efficiency with responsibility? Right, and are your stakeholders confident in both, the outcomes and the intentions behind your use of technology? Another question would be, are your performance indicators capturing what truly matters, and not just stakeholders, but the general society? I would like to thank everyone here, speakers, listeners, for being a part of today's insightful session. We've delved deep into the heart of reputation, reality, and the risk of automation, right? We have examined how technology is reshaping our profession, redefining trust, challenging us to balance efficiency and responsibility, right? This conversation today reminds us that automation is not just a tool, like Petio mentioned earlier on. This is a force that demands transparency. And I think that is something that every single one of our guests harped on today. They talked about transparency, they talked about quality control, they talked about accountability and intentional leadership, right? Also, a very sincere thank you to our speakers and panelists. More so for the way today's session has gone. The questions were dealt with by hitting the nail on the head. I think that's the word to use. More directed and really not leaving space for any doubt. And for everyone who joined us here virtually, for your questions and comments, sincere appreciation. Also, would like to appreciate P+ Measurement Services for putting together today's event. P+ Measurement Services, as I mentioned earlier, a pioneer in media monitoring and evaluation within the Nigerian African space, to be honest, and a growing business as well. So let's ensure to keep today's conversation going on our social media platforms. Just share our thoughts. As we already started doing in the comments, with the hashtag EvaluatePR30. To connect with your speakers as well on LinkedIn to learn more from them. They post regularly. Also, I would like to put in Philip Odiakose. If you have something you want to learn, I think his page is something you can learn a lot from. He recently released a book. Information on all of that is present on his LinkedIn page. Thank you all very much as we continue to safeguard our work while imbibing reputation and embracing the reality, also managing the risks that come with innovation. Until next time, thank you once again and enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Bye.